If anyone can hear us, please post on Twitch. We back? Are we back? We can hear you. Yay, can you see the red thing?
Might be muted. Okay, sorry, I was muted.
I can hear you.
I was muted on the stream, but that should be fine. Red blob on the screen. Okay, cool. Okay, everybody, I'm going to do an edit there in the official video, so...
Why do that? Just leave it there and send it.
That's just something special for everybody who's here live.
They
get to experience it.
See, have experience. So red blob is there. And this is not just a deformation. This is a bubble deformation where you can see that it goes outwards a bit as well. And of course it animates. And of course it's procedural. And of course you can colorize it because we're using vertex maps. But this is something that Simon created on Houdini. And I got permission and I did the main, let's say, concept behind this is the target effector. Oh, it's switching. Okay. Press the buttons. So
I'm trying to see if YouTube is streaming again. So, but it was me trying to tab on the other monitor. Apologies.
Okay. So the target effector is one of the least known effectors. Everyone thinks it just targets object to object and clone to clone. Actually, in deformer mode and using the repel, it actually pushes from whatever your source is, for example, the matrix object, and pushes outwards. So yeah, and I've got some smoothing here to avoid any collisions. If anyone watches my YouTube tutorials, I did the cell packing. That's a very interesting one because you use volumes to create avoidance by deforming spheres and stuff like that. Yeah, this is one of the things I'm working. Let me just show you guys, since it's better not to switch screens too much.
No, that's fine. We're good.
Stuff I'm working on. So I'm doing a bit of redshift to figure out, this is Digital Emily, for anyone that knows. It's a great project. Just Google Digital Emily and you will see they've got amazing textures. And it was quite an easy setup to do. I was looking into subsurface scattering and all that. So Digital Emily, go and download the projects. I'm preparing some tutorials where I'm trying to show various things like what is a vector. So I created this rig here that shows this vector and how the three, let's say, dimensions of a vector created and what it means. What is a normalized vector, which is this one here, the little blue one, and so forth. So that's coming at some point. Thinking particles, because there was a question about thinking particles. Now, the question I'm going to reply to, if I may, Chris, was which percentage of the functionality of X particles? And, well, I cannot reply exactly on the question. There is no percentage. The question is, what is that thing you can do in X particles and you can't do in thinking particles? The biggest drawback with thinking particles is that it cannot handle many millions of particles. And it's, as far as I know, single-threaded. So it will only work depending on the clock speed of your computer. That's how fast it can go.
Yeah, I've mostly between like 10,000 and 100,000 is like as far as you can push it on any practical level, and that's like, and it's done.
Yep, exactly. And the thing with X particles is the X particles is an ecosystem on its own, right? It's got exposure, it's got the fluids, it's got all sorts of things, and very well integrated with all third-party renderers. So it's a different story. It depends on what you do. If you want to make things like branching structures, this is just a thinking particle setup where it's using some relatively, simple math. This may seem a bit complex, but this is all we have here. Nothing else. Just a time that drives some comparisons. This comparison is to tell it to start emitting on frame 1 because the P-storm doesn't allow you to start emitting at a certain point. So it's sort of a workaround. So this is the workaround. And then we just pass the 3 turbulence, wind, and friction, which are the new connectivity since I think S22 when I use them with thinking particles. And then we are using a very simple modulo to measure 1 second, and every second it creates a new bunch of particles. So at frame 30, it will create another bunch, 60, 90, and so forth.
Moduloing the time.
Yep. And, if this is what you want, if you want a branching structure, something that is growing like this, well, yeah, X particles of course, they can do it, but thinking particles can handle it as well. So particle count is the predominant thing, and then everything else that X particles comes with. But it depends again on your time. If you get projects that work, you need to work with particles, the question is, how much is your hour worth? If let's say X particles is, what is it, $600 or something like that, $400?
I'm not sure. I think around 4, but I'm not certain.
Now, if you're charging a good hourly rate, and it's going to take you 5 days to learn thinking particles, well, actually you're losing money. And if you're going to use it for a project, so always consider the tools in relation to how you're going to use them and how much income they're going to make you. So it's not just, oh, I don't want to buy software. Well, if you're going to make money, of course you're going to buy software. Sometimes the more you spend on something, imagine if everyone's rendering in physical render because they didn't want to pay, $400-500 for Redshift, and
I just checked. It's almost 900 for X particles, US dollars. So.
It's every penny's worth. Come on, let's not complain about it.
I'm not complaining. I'm just saying I stated it was half the amount that it is, so I'm just correcting it. Like X particles is pretty great.
Oh yeah, it's a amazing ecosystem plugin. So let's move down. So this was a question by my friend Vic Garcia. He wanted this double sort of X rig. This was, I think, a car seat where he wanted to be able to control. I'm going to get rid of the sphere because that was just for fun, and I'm going to get rid of the 2 vibrate tags. So basically, you have the top controller and the bottom controller. And this is not a rig per se. There are no joints or anything like that. This is all espresso based. I'm just using Pythagoras, the Pythagoras thing, all the
Pythagorean theorem.
It's not a theorem. It's yeah. So, but yeah, the Pythagorean one, where basically you can tell the length of this triangle by knowing this, because this is always steady, and the angle it rotates. So you use simple trigonometry to calculate this angle, and you know that this is always the same length, and this gives you the y, and you do it twice and you get this rig. So this is one of my fascinations, and I think we share the same thing. How many practical problems you can solve by applying high school math, and a bit of effort, right? It will take you half an hour to figure it out, because you have to divide, you have to get, go open your textbook with trigonometry and find out which one is this. It's the R cosine, for example. You'll find anything on the internet. And you can solve some problems. This would be very difficult to solve under any other, conditions, like using joints and stuff like that, because I tried to do that and I was like, no, math is my savior. The bubble deform I showed, and what's coming out.
We got a bunch of questions coming in from people, so we're going to want to tackle those soon.
Yeah.
But if you got something else you want to show.
Just a couple of other things which I'm working on. This is coming out in about 2 weeks, I think, which is basically a way to create procedural crystals. You make 2 setups, you put them in a cloner, and you say, now I want, let's say, only 3 different ones. And once you've made one of these setups, then you just put it under here and change some parameters, and then you can make an infinite number of different crystals, and you save them out as mesh objects, and you can use them any way you want. So
very nice. Yeah, I love the infinite variation blend setup.
Yeah.
A couple different random seeds, and it's like, look, infinite variety.
Exactly. And it's literally infinite. It's not even sort of approximation. And finally, this is something I was working on a while ago, and I want to see if I can focus on it again. This is an asset I bought off a great artist, and I'm using. Well, it was pretty much the first time I used the actual motion clips, and these are. It's one clip where he's rotating, one where he's jumping up, one where he's up there and flying, and then one when he's rotating. And you can make it seamless and make this thing into a looping animation, which under other circumstances is not an easy thing to do. So we have some amazing, look at that. It's just a looping animation. You can't even see a click or a blip or anything. It's amazing how many powerful tools we have. And getting to know the tools better is going to allow you to find so many solutions for so many problems. And that will allow you to be even more creative. So you can put your full idea and execute it without any constraints. And I think that's what I have here. The vector thing about these are sort of the things generally I'm working on. No promise.
Yeah, a bunch of nice stuff coming out. I haven't used the motion clips in a long time. I used them, man, the last time I used them was probably like 8 years ago or something. But they've been there for a while, and they're incredibly powerful.
Oh, yeah. Yep. They're a bit finicky, right? Because the UX and many other technologies have changed quite a bit. And there was no real time to deal with these, but they're still fully functional. Once you know what to avoid, you can do wonders with this, especially now with Mixamo and all that, where there's so many resources where you can find ready-made animated characters and so forth. I mean, I bought this $20. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful, oh yeah, missing some materials here. Anyway, it's a kit bash material, but okay. Anyway, there you go. Beautiful asset. With I think it had 10 different animations. It had 5 different skins for colors and stuff like that. And it's $20. I mean, honestly, people pay $20 for a couple of coffees, And here's an asset you can actually make something beautiful.
Yeah, 100%.
So let's see some questions.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to pop this up. And we got a question that somebody seconded from Crossfader. And he's saying it's about collapsing objects from horizontal to vertical with proper spacing and randomization. So let's see what we've got here. First of all, muting the tab. Let's see. This is from Future Deluxe. And let's see what we've got here. Whoa. That's actually pretty crazy. Let's look at the beginning there a couple times.
Interesting.
It's a good question. I'm trying to see how... I think it's giving you the impression that it's folding, but it's not really folding. Like there's a little bit of effort in the beginning to get a couple of these bends. And then that's tricking your brain into thinking the entire thing is doing this really complex collapsing. But after a couple of these individual ones bend a bit, then you see everything just straightens themselves out.
Yeah, and now it could be on a surface. Are we getting these intersecting as well? If you pause it, do they go? Because
let's see.
When it's playing, sometimes you can't tell that there are intersections.
Yeah, there's definitely intersections. Yeah. You can see one there. So wherever it pinches in, whenever the curvature is concave, then they're intersecting. So there's nothing crazy there.
But I mean, you can morph between two states. You can use the inheritance effect, or you can just animate it, and you can have one setup where it's doing the first little bend, where it's on its, on the flat part, and then on the other part. But I think the biggest part of the animation here, it's just these cubes on a surface with a deformer, and it's just in 2 different states.
Well, I think the interesting part is the very beginning, because you get this really interesting transition from this shape out. And that I'm still trying to break it down in my head, looking at like this section right here. All of those are going to turn 90 degrees. I can't scrub in Vimeo. They'll all turn 90 degrees and then be facing vertically. And that's a really cool transition. And it really does trick your brain into thinking like there's a lot of transformations going on. But at a certain point, they all just separate off from each other. But then they line up again. That's what's throwing me off. You see how, look at this piece and this piece right there. Those two like very much feel like they have like a mechanical connection. Like it feels like a mechanical connection from here to here. But when it plays through, they just at a certain point just separate off from each other. It's like, okay, well, they separate. But then eventually they're going to just morph and turn into these individual lines. And it's that transition that is really interesting to me, because it'd be easy to fake some of that. But then they also
I would think this is
separate.
ideal for the inheritance effector.
Yeah.
We have two different setups, and you can do the second one using the matrix. So
I see. Well, okay. I'll let you totally steer on this one. I'll pull your screen back up if you want to tackle the. But once again, to throw it out there, this is from Future Deluxe, and I like these tricky ones. Brand in Motion. So I'm going to switch back. I'm going to put the reference over here. In fact, I'm going to move my cinema over here just in case I end up fiddling around while you're controlling. So your screen's back up, but you might want to start over so that everybody can see you through your process.
I'm just making I made a cloner with a smaller cube, and I made the cloner 3x1x3 and just changed the spacing. And then I make a matrix with the same spacing, and I'm just going to change some of the parameters of that. And I'm going to attempt to use, so let me take this matrix up here, and let's do something with it. I'm going to rotate the matrices of it. So they're sort of rotated in that direction, or this direction for that matter. There you go. I'm just going to put it 90 degrees for fun. And what I want to do is transform this. So I want this to inherit something from this little bugger over there. So in this case, I'm going to use the inheritance. I haven't used it for a while, which means I may make a mistake, but that's not a problem. Matrix, direct, and basically we are sort of transferring with using the inheritance effector the matrix positions from one to the other. Now I want to figure out why my rotation is not coming through. So position scale and rotation. We have a rotation over there. I would expect that to rotate. So I'm definitely forgetting something. Animation. No. Oops. So direct.
And then motion. Yeah, I was going to say the morph motion is, I think.
So now you can see that I have these two states. Now imagine if the cloner, instead of being, let's leave it as a grid, but this one, I don't want it to be a grid array anymore. Now I want this to be a landscape. Press T, make it smaller, move it up here, and let's rotate it. And I want to use the matrix to go in object mode and put this here and make 9 of these. So this should do the same thing. So we're going from the first part of that to the second. And imagine if this landscape now has some sort of deformation going on, right? I'm just going to use the simplest one, which is my formula, which I can never, ever find because it's right there underneath my mouse.
I can never find the morph in there.
I can't find anything anymore. There you go. So look at this. We have a very specific MoGraph setup over here. Let me turn off this. And then we have the second one here. And by using the inheritance, we are changing from one to the other. So basically what we're seeing in that particular situation is someone is using some form of one animation and another animation to blend between the one where they're doing one thing to the other that's doing another thing. So this will be the very generic way to make things, to blend two MoGraph setups. And you can have them aligned on one axis in one setup, on another axis in another setup, and that will make that transition without seeing that thing too much detail. This, from a sort of first view, would be the method I would use.
Yeah, I'm still curious what their initial animation was, because if they have those sort of folding up against each other, I'd almost imagine you've got some very simple geometry, maybe rigged up with bend deformers, maybe rigged up with some joints to get some initial bending, and then cloning a matrix onto those individual polygons. That gives you the initial motion, and then blending. But they'd have to, like, the indexes would have to perfectly line up, and that wouldn't be simple, or they wouldn't be arbitrary to get them lined up perfectly.
I love the way you think, Chris. It's just very simple. I would do something like this. I would set this, it's 3 by 3, fantastic. Make it editable. And then you can even do PLA animation on this. It doesn't really make a difference. Go to the cloner. Let's make this an object. Let's drag this in here. And let's set this to polygon center. And you can align or not align the clone. It's up to you. Or just rotate it. So
I think we'll have to align if we want to rotate without deformation.
Could be, yeah. I'm going to let our users decide what they're going to do. So that's what we call the cop-out, right?
We say that, but now you have to do it in the next 2 steps.
And you can see that anything you do here, I press the Command Z because I press Command Z because I'm a Mac person. So, oops. And what do we have? Yeah, the align, of course. That's Chris. Yeah. Thank you very much. So I like to do this. That's my go-to method. You can never. So there you go. You rig this up so it does that folding animation, and you can do it with joints, which I'm not going to do now. But you can see that you have full control over how these things are going to move around and do the folding. Hey, yeah, look at me. I made the setup. Whoop.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the idea. We don't have to go any more complex than that right now for the example. I do want to see if any other questions are going in. Lots of conversation is happening. Are there any new questions? Cirque is asking a question. Let's see what we've got here. I've got, once again, mute the tab. Okay, we got somebody's Instagram animation. Let's see who put this together. This is from Perry Cooper from Massachusetts. Massachusetts. Yes, that's a tricky one. Yeah, sitting uncomfortably. That's a cute name. I think there's we've got a lot of volumes going on here.
Yeah.
This is looping on the mapping. Here, I'm going to steer this time, and you correct me if I'm doing something wrong.
You can see it.
Yeah, so let's see. Starting out, let's just create any shape. I'm just going to arbitrarily do a sphere as our base volume, feed this into a volume builder, put that into a volume mesher. So that is our overall volume. Now we need some sort of noise overlaying this entire thing. So feeding in a random field is a very nice way of generating a noise. Putting that into the builder, there is now the noise. Inside the builder, I'm going to say that this should generate not as a box, but wherever it's intersecting the objects below. We're going to need a reasonable amount of resolution, but we're in a live stream, so we'll keep this reasonable-ish. And then in the noise, currently it's a Perlin noise, which is probably the noise they are using. Let's make this 10 times as large. Oh, and let's not do a union. Or do we say where those two intersect? Well, that's just the shell, actually. How do we get... Well, if I say this is just the box, that gives us the big box. Let's just start out with that, because I want to see how we can loop this noise. So we've actually got this big pattern of noise feeding through the entire system, and that's in a random field. But I'd like to layer that more. The way I was actually going to reach to do this... Actually, would we need a group? That's what I'm thinking. If we take
I've already done it. I'm just waiting for you to catch up.
Haha. So yeah, we'll put it into the group, and it's now seeing the group doing the exact same thing. Although, oh yeah, the group needs to be actually fed it, and then it made it really tiny for some reason.
Yeah, it's the 200 by 200.
But it's shrank it for some reason to 40.
It's a minor little glitch.
Yeah, it's a little bug. So yeah, now that we're in here, we can loop this around via, in the group field, feeding in different modifications. So what's your go-to? Would it be a sine wave or a curve on that?
I prefer, if I want to modularize something, I actually select it, go to the remapping and change my curve. That's my go-to way. Select the random field, go to remapping, go to contour, go down to the spline offset. So curve, reset the spline so it's linear. So click in the right click in the box, reset, and then use the spline offset and the spline range. Increase the spline range. Increase the spline range so it actually modulates it. There you go.
Ta-da.
So now that's it. Done.
Nice. I usually, actually, I don't know if the spline range comes through. I usually, because it's so fiddly to go into the remapping and then scroll down to the bottom into the curve, I usually make an external curve outside of it.
Yep.
And does that remap, does this carry through the same settings? I don't use it. Yeah, I guess we could do it here as a separate object above it. And could you do that directly with a curve? Because that's my usual go-to, but this doesn't have the same offsets.
Yep. You could do that. You can use a formula to do a modulo.
Yeah.
As usual, there are about 60,000 ways, or 62.3 thousand ways to do that.
I usually say there's 12 ways, but maybe there's even more. 12 reasonably different ways that aren't just iterations on each other.
I have a piece of advice for you, Chris. Make the voxel size bigger because your animation is playing slowly.
Well, yeah, that's what I said. We're in a live stream. But, I mean, we'd want it to be pretty dang smooth overall. But while we're in a live stream, obviously, you want the voxels to be reasonable. But, yeah, then you're going to get real chunky. So it's a push and pull on that. And then if we want to smooth that out more, the two options pretty much are, I usually reach for the smoothing when I can get away with it. Putting that into the volume measure will smooth it very nicely. You'll still get some weird pinches, and I've never really found a great way around that, where you'll see, as I increase this, I just want to really point out, you see like this little pinch right there? So no good way, as far as I know, to get rid of that, but this calculates very quickly. The slower way to calculate is using the SDF smooth inside of it, which will round everything out very nicely, but it really will do a major hit on your frame rate, depending on how many voxels that we've got here. Yep. Yeah, you just intersect this shape with whatever shape that we wanted, such as, in this case, the chair. But I think this is pretty much exactly that. There's so many ways to layer this up, change things, change the base noise that we're feeding inside. I guess we'd have to find the right contrast levels. These won't all be good candidates right out of the box, but they will all loop around. But that's why Perlin noise is great. It's kind of got the best middle range.
And one of the things I really like to do is I put a smooth deformer over the mesher. That takes care of a lot of the artifacts without actually losing the actual volume definition. So I try to deal with some of these artifacts using smoothing the mesh itself, not the volume. It depends, and it's always
what's that in contrast to what I said? Because I mentioned the SDF smooth, but that's a last resort for me because it's slow, and then I put in the smoothing deformer here in the geometry.
I told you I can't see at 2 feet. Yeah, now I can see.
Okay,
it.
Okay, so that it is literally what I did. There you go. See, I was ahead of you on that one. Okay, we do have more questions coming in though, which I want to check out. I'm a little worried about this one whenever these types of questions come in, but we'll see what your take is on it. So from Mick, they're asking about creating beer foam. So let's check out the reference we've got here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's just really straight. It's just a still image, but like even imagine you were building some sort of rig to actually animate this. Do you have like all of my methods would be doing volume type things, which are not simple. They'd be fairly complex rigs.
Well, the noise. So yeah, the render, the material itself. Let's forget about the bubbles for a second.
I guess the bubbles are what I'm mainly concerned with.
Oh, well, that's a totally different thing you need to tackle, because a bubble is not just a hole, right? It has a thin film on top of it. So exactly. One way is to say, okay, I'm going to go full mesh on this and make 500,000 bubbles and so forth, which has its own overhead. If you're going to use any volume that will be able to hold the bubbles, you need to make it extremely dense. So your the times are going to go sky high. It's going to be very, very slow. The solution I think is best is to fake it, depending on how close you're going to be to that, to fake it using a material. If you pull away,
just real quick for some clarity, for everybody, like in reality, like all of this foam is actually like hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of tiny little bubbles. We just happen to see some larger bubbles, so it's not like there's a couple bubbles in this. There are like millions and millions of bubbles if you're going to build it for real. So that's definitely where at least the majority of this you'd want to fake with a texture Do you want to steer for a little bit if you have a specific idea?
In terms of the material,
Yeah.
the standard thing is that this is a subsurface scattering material. That's one of the ways you can tackle it, or it's a volumetric material. You may be able, I don't know, this is something I would like to try, to create a fog volume, a quite dense one that sort of resembles, have the little cavities and so forth, just as a first pass. And instead of creating each bubble as a individual bubble, put a skin over it, which is sort of the outer surface of the bubbles. But I don't know if it's something, I don't know, let me think. I don't think it's something I can do anything that resembles that in 3 minutes. This is something I want to think about. So I'm using what's called a pencil. It's a mechanical device by which you use carbon to do dark lines on light, thin sheets of a material called paper, right? It's how tablets were designed to look like. So, foam. Oh, because I've been asked, what is that? Holding a pencil and paper. Yeah, so I'm going to look into that and see if I come up with something. Now, someone posted a YouTube video that says beer foam achieved here. I mean, I don't know.
I have a policy that we don't go watch other people's tutorials, especially on the stream. If somebody else has a solution, go watch that solution.
Yep. I want to see the final result because you can always take a photo of foam. So use a black, actually not a black, a white surface. Take a photo. Jessica Weiss did some interesting tutorials on Cineversity a few months ago where she was actually doing practical effects using fish tanks and spraying things on paper, and you shoot with your iPhone, nothing more, just a decent lighting setup. And when I say decent, nothing even really professional. A couple of lights, IKEA lights, and you can use those as textures. I know it's cheating, but I have to remind everyone, everything is cheating. Right? When you look at your screen, it's not a real world. It's cheating. Right? Everything is approximated. So, yeah, cheating is allowed. So if you can cheat using practical effects, which the majority of stuff that was made up until 20 years ago, it was all practical effects. So they still stand. Are you trying to do foam?
Yeah, I just had a thought of doing a procedural material. I know we do on a series of different layers and see if we get something semi-reasonable that doesn't take a million years. And this is not aiming for the entire end result, but let's just see. Because there is one noise type that does really good little circles, and it is one of the Voronoi types. It's not displaced, is it? Maybe it might be Voronoi 1. Yeah, okay, this one. If I crop this in, you'll see I'll start getting small circles. So there, and I mean, I'm thinking we want this to be as large as possible without starting to see like the cell pattern. I guess we could even still see the cell pattern, but something like that. This needs to be inverted, so I'll invert that. Of course, anytime you're doing, actually, no, I think we would want this. Anytime you're layering up a bunch of alphas, Cinema it's going to start getting really slow really quickly. And we probably would, let's see, that's applying on one material. Let's see if they all line up. I'll put a little more spacing between them for the initial render. Let's just put 5 units in between each. And when I hit render, yeah, right now they're identical the way they're lining up. So let's make sure that that material is either set to, the simple way for our demo would just be set this to world coordinates. So now you'll see that they should be different on each one. So now I've got, in theory, in this case, 10 layers of bubbles. And we could start adding more depth to it by shrinking them or clipping in more. So now there's not quite so many bubbles on each layer. And yeah, those aren't terrible. And if we layer these up, we see the pattern? Yeah, we need some decent space. So let's do like 20 layers of that. I don't think the render is set up to go that deep. So let's go to our options and make sure that the ray depth, I'll just set this up to the maximum 500. We're probably not going to get there, but let's just crank it. So why not?
It does slow down your render, everyone should know, but because it's fully multi-threaded, if you have a good computer, it won't be.
But this will give you some...
Yep.
decent depth on these. But of course, it's kind of because the bubbles are sort of the opposite concept, right? Where it's like those would be holes in it. I don't know. It's kind of a weird concept.
Well, you have to use, I guess you can use that one as a mask to do small reflections and one to create divots.
Yeah. So,
Because
yeah,
you
I
have
wasn't even.
it's a
Go ahead.
divot in the foam, and well, it's all bubbles, but the obvious bubbles are a divot in the foam, and they have a shiny surface on top. And
Yeah, we definitely need a different material at the end. Yeah, see, we can't. They need depth, so the little individual circles work better when that was inverted. But yeah, I don't have a great answer for it. We could turn to ambient occlusion, which is not the setup. I just want to see what kind of depth that might give us, and make sure this evaluates the transparency. And I just want to see if we get. Yeah, you see, it's already kicking its butt because ambient occlusion does not like calculating transparency on a good day, and now we're sending this through a ton of layers. You can see how slow this is going, even with all the cores. Yeah, that's not giving us much in the way of depth.
It's not enjoying it, obviously. So I'm doing a subsurface scattering setup. Very simple, nothing intricate. Continue, and if you don't hear me replying, it's because I'm thinking hard. I'm seriously single-threaded.
Yeah, this didn't really reveal any depth in any relevant sense. But it also goes to, if I put more space in between them, it might. But let's just kill that ambient occlusion. And, yeah, I mean, it just goes to the reality. Oftentimes I'm like, let's build it the way it is in the real world. We can't really do that because it would be just an absolute insane amount of actual bubbles that would need to be circle packed for all purposes. But they'd also, if it was animated, need the ability to be moving. That's just not a practical thing. I mean, honestly, the most basic version of this, I'm not saying this would be good, but I just wonder how it would look. And if you do get something cool to show, like shout it out and I'll jump over. But
well, I've created a simple SSS without any reflection, and with a bit of imagination, it's starting to look like some sort of foamy thing. Yeah. So this is nothing more than a standard redshift material. I'm going to drag it here. Right, I've got my buckets here, and what I'm going to do so that everyone enjoys this better, I've created a dome light, a simple dome light, and I changed the exposure. I've created 2 area lights with target tags targeting the cylinder for the very, very specific reason. I'm too lazy to rotate things. It's very difficult to rotate things. I'm not joking. Whereas the target tag, you just drag here. It's so comfortable. So, and then you get rid of the reflection here. So go to your reflection. Reflection is here. It's not there. Just in case you're wondering, there we go. So no reflection. And last but not least, you go to multi-SSS and you set it to 1. And already now this is starting to look like a spongy, foamy thingamadoodly. Now, something like this, I know it's overexposed on one side. Maybe the dome light needs to go down a bit. No, the dome light. I like the dome light. One of the 2 lights. Anyhow, what you could do is start enhancing this with other various things. And Chris said something which is very, very important. Many times we try to recreate the real world by trying to imitate how it works. Now, there is a certain, let's say, level by which you have to follow that process. You need to understand how the real world works in order to replicate things. But you need to know at which point you need to stop doing that one-to-one replication, and you need to start faking it, because it's always a balance. Like, do it in post. Yeah, why would you remember back in the day when we had standard and physical, where a lot of people will do their motion blur using motion vectors, and yes, it worked, and it saved you, half your lifetime waiting for the renders to finish. So in this particular case, I would go and start playing with this material, maybe adding some sort of noise, maxon noise, and let's put that in the sort of reflection. So I'm going to go to my base properties and go close the sheen. This sheen, for some reason, it's calling me. Come here, come here.
No, the sheen is very prominent.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Before you go too far, along this concept, would it be feasible to clone a series of spheres onto the surface here for the big bubbles, do a bunch of randomizing of the scale, and then do a volume of it where you subtract those out from it? So then you could use the original geometry of the bubbles, the volume of the bubble subtracted from the surface, probably another volume that would just be a little pushed outside of that to do a final gloss layer on top of the entire thing. As that would be the hybrid method where we're just building the prominent bubbles. We're letting the subsurface do the tiny bubbles, but that could still give you the little surface imperfections and the little glossiness and the curvature of the bubbles.
Well, funny enough, that was the way I was trying to make. What is that white drink with the brown things in it? Sort of an Asian drink, very
like boba tea type of thing.
Yeah, something like that. I think that's the name. And I was trying to replicate that when I first saw Redshift. I think it was NAB, and when they announced the acquisition of Redshift, and that was the first thing that I thought of doing for some reason. I don't know why. And I used precisely the method you're talking about. It was a lot of volumes to create those little brown things and use that as an instance somewhere else and all that. So yes, that be a solution. So now I'm just pushing this. Let's go 1,500 of these. I love multi-instances. Don't you love them, Chris?
Yeah, they're pretty great. But then it's very important to remember them when you go to do something like color variation. You're like, why isn't it working? Oh yeah, I've got the multi-instance.
It does work. No, other things.
Well, it depends on this. Certain things in certain situations. It's just like, why isn't this working? Oh yeah, multi-instance doesn't allow that thing, but it does allow a surprising amount of things. And then this is actually an excellent situation for a push-apart that'll actually scale them down so they don't intersect.
Yep. Or because I don't want to put the push apart. Anything that has iterations irritates me. People need to know I'm very easily irritated. So I'm like one of those grumpy cats. So let me just do a random with a scale. If nothing else, just to not do what you said. Right? I apologize. But
well, the random scale would be a good idea one way or the other, but the push apart would stop intersections if we cared about such things.
That's the kind of person I am, Chris. You would know that. Come on. We've hung out quite a bit.
It's got to be a contrarian.
That's my good part, though. And of course, when you're doing reflections, stuff like that, always use an HDR. So, dome light, click on this, HDR asset. There we go. Assets, a couple I like. Anyone you would like? Anyone would like to propose?
I don't know the built-in ones.
Oh, these are the old ones, but they're here. I'm going to put this industrial space in here. All right, close this. See if that... It doesn't have contrast. It's always that. It doesn't have contrast. A wood scene would be nice. So there's one with some trees here. There you go. I think trees always help.
Yeah, drinking in the forest. That's the best place.
Come on, render.
There you go. Yeah.
There you go. So now because we have that light, and what have we spent here? Like 5 minutes? So it doesn't look like foam 100%, but we are getting closer to something that could resemble foam in some way. And yes, if we were a bit more adventurous, I would go Chris's route, where you would take the cylinder, put it under a volume, subtract these. You can't use multi-instances to do that, so you can do it some other way. In this particular case, I could even think of maybe a matrix object or a point object instead of the cloner itself, and use the points in the volume using point mode, because then you won't have to deal with all these objects.
And it still sees a scale, right?
That's a very good question. Well, I would find another way. But anyhow, as you can see now what's going on here, we are getting something that may start resembling.
Yeah, it looks really nice on the rim there. It's like surprisingly good considering these bubbles are just passing right through the surface.
Yeah, there you go. These look like bubbles. This doesn't look like foam. I wouldn't drink this. I would.
Well, it's a lot of foam one way or the other anyway.
Right? Don't drink this, please, please. Yeah, and we don't give medical advice, right? This is purely entertainment.
Yep.
This is definitely not good for you. But anyhow, yeah, this would be between all the stuff you said and this, and depending on how close you're going to go. If this is a hero product, if you want to zoom right in there, sometimes the technique you're going to use for your very close-up shot is completely different compared to the one you're going to use for the long shot. So even that is something you need to take into consideration when you're building something like this.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers, and there's even a big difference between if you're building a still. There'd be a big difference between building a still and building animation. Completely unrelated rigs, depending on what's going on there.
Yep.
Let's tackle the next question, though. I think we've gone far enough on that one. That looked better than I thought it would for the amount of time we put into it. Zach has a question. The yellow part in this. Let's see what we got. Ooh, we got some crazy fungus growth, it looks like. So this is from mushroom.ig, presumably mushroom.instagram.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I love the real life references.
Yes. Okay.
Blah, 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 blah. I just wonder what's happening in between the pieces when they're at the beginning state, because let's see, my go-to on this would be you'd pre-build your hexagon mesh first, and then I would counter deform it through like a mesh deformer. So a secondary simple object could be running some dynamics, perhaps some soft body dynamics, and that could inflate, and that would be deforming the more complex final geometry.
You couldn't have said it. I couldn't have said it better, Chris.
Oh, thank you. I thought
That's
you'd
it.
have
Yeah.
your.
The final.
What's one of the other 64,000 ways we could do it? Let's see. What's the
What you said? What you said about building the final actually is one of those things where I always promote it as a solution when you're building MoGraph. Try and build the final result, the one which is going to be your hero shot first, and then in a subtractive way try and get things down to the original one, to the beginning. And if you think about it, it's more important to see that final state. That's the more impressive part of it. Whereas how it begins, it doesn't really matter. This looks like a yellow cylinder. So always start from what is the most important part of what you're showing.
Yes, sirree. And I would probably even keep this as parametric as I can, even though I just made all this editable. And just for anybody who I wasn't talking through it, I just made a sphere. I selected all the points. I did a bevel on those, which essentially gives us almost entirely hexagons. There's a few 5-sided ones just because of the nature of that type of sphere. But then we could, if I wanted to round this, and you will see in the reference that they're a little bit rounded. So it's even like a beehive honeycomb is very hexagonal, but it's rounded on the corners. So you see these are like kind of rounded hexes. They get a little thicker in these corners, which doesn't happen here. So even procedurally speaking, something that could be nice would be, well, here, let me show you. If I were to throw this into a subdivision surface immediately, it's going to round it out too much. You see it's all gotten very rounded. The hex is gone. But if that first goes into a cloth surface and we subdivide that one time, so you'll see right here we have, I don't want to do any thickness this time, but I do want to add a single subdivision. It's now subdivided. It's added a lot of geometry, but because of this procedural subdivision, I can say, hey, now subdivide it. And now you see we get to maintain the overall hex shape, but we get these rounded insides. So that's just one thought on that. And presumably we could even take a smoothing and put this as the secondary child, so it actually applies to it. And when you're using, I've been saying this a lot lately, but when using smoothing, I do agree that we don't want to do any more iterations than we have to. And this stiffness is already on by default, and that's eating up iterations. So let's get rid of that entirely. And now the more I smooth this, the more you'll see that will also round it. So it's kind of an additional thing we can do there. So actually a little extra rounding will kind of nice. Now that that's happened, this entire thing could then be fed into a cloth surface. And don't subdivide this time. Instead, add thickness. Ooh, that's getting a little funky there. With all these extra subdivisions, I suppose.
Chris, can you stop doing what I'm doing?
Yeah, but that thickness didn't work as quite as well as I thought now that I rounded that out so much. Let me make sure it's not the smoothing. Oh, it was the smoothing. It didn't like the smoothing so much there. But you know what? We could put in the cloth surface and then do smoothing after the fact.
I do have a little.
Yeah, there we go.
I do have a little difference here. So when you're done, I'm using the Voronoi actually to create my.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I love doing that. That's great as well. And yeah, even here, I would have liked to have added a little more thickness initially, but you can see the overall shape. But what's nice about this setup is I still just have this original geometry here. So that means I can do my deformations on a very, very low poly approximation of the overall shape. So in this case, let's make another sphere, and I will put it on the icosahedron. So it's pretty much the exact same thing. And this we're going to do this very simple version. So I'm just going to make it be a small squishy ball. So let's add a simulation soft body. And I would like it to, yes, indeed, be a soft body. If we hit play, it'll just fall to the ground and hopefully, let's make the ground dynamic. It'll just be kind of this squishy ball. But if we keyframe the scale of it, in this case, I would like the rest length. It's very important not to just jump to a set scale. We need to transition into it. It can freak it out if you do otherwise. So let's keyframe that. And over the first 10 frames, I'll scale this down to 10% of the overall scale. And now that we've got 10% of the overall scale, I'll stick on that for 10 frames, and then we'll do a slower transition out all the way up to 90. So that'll scale us back up to 100. And I'll even lengthen the timeline by a couple extra frames just so we can see it. So let's just see what that ball is doing. So that shrinks down, squishes on the ground, so you just get this pathetic little squished thing. But then it's going to begin inflating itself, hopefully. I didn't catch that last keyframe. Let's go here and say 100% on 100%. Do you find if you type in a number very quickly and click off, it doesn't acknowledge it? I'm a little too quick on that one. But
happens to me all the time, Chris. Happens to me all the time.
Burp. So there you go. So you get this nice squishy thing. I wonder, I don't know. I don't do this very often, but just to emulate our original thing a little bit more, I'm going to see if I can attach a spring to the top here. So let's see what our point index is, because that's a quick way of doing it. Where's structure? This is point number 12. So creating a simulate dynamics spring. I would like to hit Shift S for snapping, turn off snapping so I don't forget. So this spring will connect to this sphere. I don't want the center of mass. I want a particular polygon point. That point is number 12. So it's got 0 length right there. Rest length of 0. Stiffness hopefully is fine. The hope here, and there's a good chance it'll explode. So let's just see what happens. But if I play, yeah, you see it sticks there. But we need it to be, well, it's kind of flinging around a little bit. But yeah, you see it's actually hanging from there. So you know what? Good enough for our test. So this becomes our reference mesh. So I'll just call that reference. And this needs to be deformed via our mesh deformer. I found it quickly this time. That will deform via this. And I would like to say also look at the surface area outside of it just in case. Let's initialize, which will kind of hide the original mesh. And with any luck, yeah, our other geometry will properly scale with it. I think we get that frame of lag, but I don't think it actually happens in the end. And if you did see it during your render, that frame of lag, you could always bake out your dynamics. But this is running quick enough. I'm not super worried about that. Now this ends up having quite a few polygons, but let's see how quickly this runs because of the process we made. And yeah, those all squished together. And yeah, so it's actually clumped up pretty well. I probably want to scale that, but yeah, now this will grow. And now just the space in between is mostly scaling. And it is fully dynamic. So that could be squishing and bouncing off of other shapes as well. Let's just turn off that spring, let it bounce off the ground, and we'll check out what Noseman put together. So this actually fall with gravity, squish into the ground. And then as it grows, blurb. I'd need a visible offset here so it wouldn't pass through the ground, but that'd be pretty simple to add. So yeah, that's my thought on that. And that could be trapped inside of a cup or a container because it's fully dynamic. But yeah, that's my version of this. I'm going to switch over to your screen and let's see what you got.
No dynamics. Just procedural. It's terrible. The result is not the same, but I don't care. That's the good thing about teaching people. You don't have
your Voronoi cut is
so
way
let
nicer.
me,
I like that.
Quickly break this down so we know what we're talking about. So one of the tricks you can do with the Voronoi, I think the first person was Derya Ozturk that showed this, and Yadder is his name, and I think he's an alien. I mean, yeah, he comes up with these things like, so if you go to the Voronoi fracture and you drag in the object itself, especially if it's a icosahedron, this is what you get. And then all you have to do is go and offset this by a hefty amount, invert it, and make it hull only. We have the prototype of what we need here. Then you can take this and put it under, let's say, a subdivision surface or a cloth surface. I'm messing up my shortcuts, something like this. You can add your thickness. I'm going to set this to 1 and 1. I'm going to set this to 1 or 0 for that matter. You can do whatever you want. No, 0. See, I can't make up my mind. That's a problem. That's a problem. So we have this nice little geometry here, and then we're going to go and Alt-G it, also known as group, get your smoothing, drag it in here, and if you want to, you have now your topology. Here it is. Fantastic. What else did I do? And then I used the magic of deformers, the shrink wrap. It's so underused, this bloody thing, the shrink wrap.
Yeah. That collision deformer, I never respected them enough.
I love the collision deformer.
No, they're great. I just, for years, was like, well, no, I'm going to simulate it instead of
good for you.
Deform it. But yeah. But no, that's what I'm saying is I appreciate them more now.
Yep. And there you go. And now you're going to drag a field in here and set it to +y, and you put it down here, and you go, wee, and you can do this.
Oh, you got the
and of course, the other thing I like is the fact that you can bake something out as a lembic, and when you bring it in, you can apply secondary animations using deformers. So, yeah, you can do some sort of simulation, your basic object, make this a mesh object instead of a primitive. Do whatever you want to do with it. For soft bodies, I like to use the mesh deformer. That is something I think I've seen you do quite a few times.
Well, I just did the mesh deformer in my version.
Right. But in more complex stuff as well. The mesh deformer is overall the greatest way to use soft body dynamics. That's the connection I'm trying to make here. Yeah.
Well, I have that super old tutorial where I was dropping a series of like heavy safes on top of a van, but it was so low poly, it ran on almost real time.
That is something that people are not using enough, I think.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, it's super cool. It's really, really, really powerful for our character stuff as well. Like you can rig up and weight a very low poly character and then project the entire thing onto a high poly character.
Oh, yep.
So much power on that. Everybody had put a bunch of links for different foam results and tutorials. So thanks for posting those.
Wait a minute. Is Crossfader Yadder?
No.
Yeah. Oh.
That's Lucas. But somebody asked you said what's the name. Somebody asked what name you mentioned, and he's answering.
Okay. Yeah. Good. I was like, oh my God, all the internet handles. It's funny.
Yeah. No, it gets tricky. Let's see. There was a question on YouTube. It's going back a little ways. Actually, yeah, this one's kind of neat. So there's a typed out question on YouTube, and I do like the typed out question. So Demi's Art, if you're still in there, is there a way, I've already got it in my head, but I'd be curious of your answer as well. Is there any way to use a vertex map to influence the density of clones on a surface? Let's say they're randomly placed objects on a surface, but you want the density to be driven via a vertex map.
All right, let's see. Let's push apart would be my idea, and use a vertex map from another object. I mean, you can use a vertex map wherever you use anything else, but let's do this. You
don't like push apart. We know one thing about you. Well, we know two things. You're Greek and you don't like push apart.
Yeah, but I'll have to use it. Okay, I have to use it. All right, I can do this. So let's take MoGraph. Let's put some, spheres, icosahedron. Sorry, I just like to do that. Icosahedron is a difficult Greek word, which means it's actually ikosaedron, which means 20 faces. And all the Greeks now have goosebumps. Like, no, it's Greek. Of course I speak Greek. My Greek is better than my English. And my English is not that shabby.
That's a way cooler word than icosahedron, too.
Yeah, well, you didn't say it properly, but I'm not going
Well,
not
what's the
going to
proper
talk.
way? I say that one all the time.
Icosahedron.
Icosahedron or I
Yep.
all right.
Icosahedron. So
Icosahedron.
icosahedron. Got it? So let's assume we have these, and what I'm going to do just for the fun of it, I'm going to put them on the polygon centers. So now we have a very uniform distribution here. And oh, yeah, I made this too. All right, let me just change it out for another one. I'm going to fix it in a second. So let's go and make the circle, the sphere bigger. And a few more. Just get them to slightly touch. Now, one of the good things about the icosahedron is because it's like triangles, you can actually create spheres that just barely touch each other. And one of the tricks you can do is create a second one where it actually puts them not on the polygon center, but on the vertices. And there you go. So now it's full. I'm sure there's another way, easier. Just make your triangles smaller. But anyhow, so let's change the density now. So I'm going to select them both. Another thing you can do and use the same effector. Let's try the push apart, and I'm going to do the hide method. My spheres are 5, so this should be a maximum of 5. So otherwise they're going to disappear. I'm going to make it 4. I think 5 is going to make them go. Good. And let's go and put a fall off, which is going to be a vertex map from this sphere. I don't even know if this is going to work, but I don't care. I'm like Ricky Gervais. I don't care. Oh, you've seen it. Yeah,
no,
okay.
Ricky Gervais is great.
There you go. So now the push apart effector is only affecting the areas. And let's go and put some fields here. Because you know why? Because why not?
Yeah.
So let's go and put a noise, and there you go. So now we have a noise which is controlling the density of these buggers, and you can remap this thing in different ways. Inner, outer. I just prefer the curve, and you can do this, and you can do that, and you can start increasing your push apart. So there you go. It's hiding, and now let's go and deal with this little bugger here. What did I do? Where's my field list? It's here. Fall off. Right click. Reset to make it linear. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to go to the random field and add some animation. See what this does. See if it's going to work or it's going to break. There you go.
Bloop, 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 bloop. Yeah, that's cool. I didn't use the hide option very often in that.
It's terrible.
Cool.
Yeah. Push apart. 2. Let's go. The scale apart. That's your favorite one, isn't it?
Depending on the situation. Well, I mean, I think the push apart is great for anything that's not animated. If it's animated, it's terrible because it introduces jitter. Because every time you change the input, the iterations are going to do a different interpretation, and it's not blending between like previous frame and next frame. So.
Yep. So, of course, we can do this using a random, but if you want to use vertex maps for whatever reason, that's how you would do it. You would just use the vertex map as the input to whatever you're trying to do to create your collision avoidance and so forth. I don't know. Did this answer the question?
Yeah, I think that's a really clever method. It's a really clean. Mine was going to involve a plane scaling down to 0 and then like overlapping a different noise type, but. This is, I think this is like 2 steps less than mine would have been. So very nice.
But yours has 2 steps more, so you can sell it more expensively. Right? That's how.
Yeah.
More questions. Come on.
Yeah.
Is that the best? Is that the best you have?
Yeah. Vertex maps can. Oh, well, yeah, Joel didn't know that vertex maps could be dragged in as a field. Yes, that's one of the most powerful things in cinema these days. I love how there was like, when they introduced fields into vertex maps went from this thing in cinema that's kind of clunky and yet only have to use reluctantly to being one of the most powerful things in cinema, this universal language to transfer something to something else.
Okay, so I have a question for everyone. All right, here's my question. When you create an effector, and in the fall off, you drag a matrix object or any MoGraph object, and the mode is MoGraph object. What does this data represent?
Jeez, I have no idea.
Come on. I'll give you all 5 seconds plus the lag. That's 15. So what data comes from the matrix in the field list? No. Which data from the matrix? Which data from the matrix? Exactly. I go by Zach. It's the weighting. The weight. Nothing else comes in. Just the weights. So if you take this and you add, let's say, so first of all, why did this happen? All right, that's better. So let me show you exactly how this works. You got a matrix, and let's go and create a matrix with weights. So let's turn on the weights. So go here, turn on the weights. They're all zeros. And I'm going to go and add let's get a random effector. And this random effector, I don't want it to affect any of the parameters, but I want it to affect the weights. So now we have weight randomization. Now, for whatever reason, if you create another plane effector and you drag the matrix in here, you're bringing in basically as the zeros and ones, it's the values of the weights. This used to be the system in the fall-offs, where you would do a weight. What was it called? Do you remember that, Chris? It's been a long time ago.
What fall-offs?
A weight fall-off, yeah. So the way to do weight fall-offs now is by dragging a MoGraph object in MoGraph object mode inside the field list. So as long as you're playing with the weight, nothing else comes in. No positions, nothing. Just the weights for each and every one of the clones.
Interesting. Well, it's good to know. Because I've repeatedly tried to drag it in as like positional information. It's like, no. Oh, nope, that doesn't work.
Nope. So what do we have here? Well, how do you use a MoGraph color shader with SDS applied to the cloner? I can't see the connection. If you have cloner object and you have an SDS, is this some sort of oddity where it's not going to work? MoGraph color. So MoGraph color shader, and I'm going to use the color. Let's go to this. Yeah, maybe. I'm very curious. Random parameter, not this. Effector color and render. Ooh.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, okay. Well, the solution is to put the cube into the subdivision and then put the subdivision into the cloner, but the subdivision surface does not see color information.
That's interesting. Yeah, may have seen it in the past, but I forgot, which makes it a new thing. Yes, interesting. There's something about the generator that does that. Now the question is, does it do the same thing with other generators? So what generator can we use with two objects? Let's say the symmetry. Let's see
I think the cloth nerves.
Oh, look, the generators don't support it. And I think the reason is, just in case people didn't know, where does MoGraph store the MoGraph color?
I know
you
the
know
answer
that,
to that
Chris.
one, but
yeah. It's actually the display color. The MoGraph assigns the color data in each object's display color. So in this particular case, if you make this editable, each cube retains its color because it's part of that. So once you put this under a subdivision surface, this is the one that overrides the color. And therefore, you have a problem. Interesting.
Yeah. But oftentimes it's just rearranging the hierarchy so it does see it. But unfortunately, cloning a bunch of subdivisions is way slower to calculate than subdividing a bunch of clones. Let's see. Just scrolling through the chat. Ed, ask me that question next week. I'll tackle that when we don't have a guest on. Actually, here's a question. You do Redshift stuff. Somebody's asking about the idea of a proximal shader in Redshift. Like, is there anything like the proximal in Redshift? I haven't explored this thoroughly, but I'm so dependent on the proximal for so many different things. Yeah. I'd be curious if there's an equivalent. No,
as far as I know, unless you do some fancy math.
I was going to say, like, is answer here,
Now,
fancy math, and is that even
yeah.
possible? That was my assumption. I just haven't executed on it.
One of the things I'm getting on now, I'm trying to learn, is OSL. And I've seen some examples that Adrian did. Anyone that's on the forums, or Redshift forums, Adrian is sort of, he's a mythical figure of Redshift. He works for Maxon. He knows everything. He knows more than, that's built in Redshift. That's how much he knows. So he doesn't know everything. He knows more than everything. And he was showing us some examples of OSL and all that. And it's amazing what you can do. What I would suggest, I forget those links. All right, if you Google, it's SDF selfie girl. There's this guy, I remember, I forget his name all the time, where he uses Shader Toy and OSL and stuff like that to create from scratch using only math, amazing visuals.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I've seen this before.
In theory, OSL will be able to do that kind of stuff. Now, for anyone that likes to code, it's a lot of fun. It's based on C++. So if you know Arduinos, if you know C++ and all that, it's okay. But anyone that doesn't know how to code, you can find ready-made code which works with Arnold, which works with Corona, V-Ray. They all support OSL. You just copy and paste it in there. And there's even on, oh, yeah, you go. Yeah, that is crazy.
The point being is this is a shader, and using math, he is generating like step by step through this entire video, like he is doing like all this code and shading.
Geometry. There's no geometry.
It's not geometry.
Nope. Yeah,
but he actually models up an entire character.
And
not model. He shades up an entire character. It's just insane to consider, like the possibility of something like that.
So the idea behind this is Redshift has a GitHub with OSL shaders. So if you search on GitHub Redshift OSL, you'll find a huge repository of these things, and you just copy and paste them in there, and it does crazy stuff. And I think that I don't know. I find it really, really interesting that you can sit down and start writing your little math and getting all sorts of weird shaders. So under that, the reply for the proximal shader is that I think that if someone with slight knowledge of OSL sits down, they can make a shader, and it's crazy fast because it compiles into native Redshift shaders. So it takes a couple of seconds maybe even less to compile it, and then it runs at full 100% Redshift GPU speed.
That's just the whole world that I know nothing about.
Oh, you have no idea. I've downloaded stuff. I've started reading about it. I'm trying to figure out. I actually created my first shader, which is just to make something red.
Yeah, exactly. Every time I've ever done any of that stuff, even just in like Substance Designer, and you start getting into like breaking down the actual math of it, it's always like, no. Somebody said, how would you do a 3D pin art box, which I think is when there's a bunch of nails hammered into a board, and then people take a thread and then run it from one nail to the next to the next. I don't have any instant go-to for that.
That wouldn't be easy to do automatically, but I guess what you could do using the tracer is create do we want this to be dynamic? To what extent do we want this to be procedural? If you want to make the rope wrap around something, again, you make your final one, and then you use something like a spline wrap to make it animate. So let's start with the simple stuff. Let's assume
just as a framing device, keep in mind that when somebody's actually making that string art, they're making thousands and thousands of decisions of exactly where the string should go at what time and where they will intersect. So the idea of, I wonder if there would be some way of, essentially taking a black and white image and generating a series of splines, like more splines at a particular spot, and then you make those target a different nail. Like if you just had a big circle of nails, I wonder if there would be something there where you could just feed in an image and then more of them will intersect at a given spot, thus making it, a brighter pixel.
Make it appear that it's that, because if you want to make it one continuous string that does that, you can either go and draw it, right? That's always a solution, right?
Yes, exactly.
But
Do
other
the 10,000
than that,
decisions.
Yeah, it is, I think, too complex. Nothing that code can't fix. But if you want to, these things are better to be approximated as far as exactly what Chris is talking about. So let's look at this structure for a second, right? We have the straight lines, which you can get a straight line and use MoGraph on an object, or using fields with a shader effect to place them in position. And wherever you have sort of a bend, you can go and have a separate element, which is this little round thing, something like that. But you will need to develop some sort of algorithmic approach. I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't think it's possible to do with just a procedural setup using the tools. Yeah. You will need something. Could be a bit of code, could be 3 lines of code, could be something else. Because I didn't know what you exactly were talking about, but you're talking about those whole artworks which are made by string and nails and all that. Ooh.
Yeah. That'd be something cool. Maybe hit me up with that question again some other time, because that's one that will take a giant chunk of time, and we don't even have that much time left today. But it's a good question. I would be interested to think about it again in the future.
Oh, there is a question. How do you install those OSL shaders? Oh, you don't install anything. All right. Let me go and find an OSL shader. I think, give me one little second. I'm going to go. That was my son. Package. So I'm on my other screen, and I think I have my OSL. Oh, I didn't think of opening OSL, but I'm going to do that. OSL, just searching my Dropbox. Chris, you can show something. Oh, I found the tests.
Oh, okay.
So the fake room, I have something here. Let me try this, just so you can see what can be done with OSL. It didn't work 100%, but that's not a... So... let's turn this on, and let's go here. And basically, OSL is just a node. And in the node, you go to the OSL, and this is the code. So basically, I'm going to show you what this does, and I'm going to teach you my understanding of OSL. This is not it. Let me compile. Look, it's a white cube. Watch this. Watch this. I'm going to do some serious programming now. I'm going to make this compile. Why didn't it compile?
I don't know.
Compile. Oh, it's not compiling, but anyway. I do not know why it's not compiling. Oh, yeah, it's the in color. This is the default. So color, in color, default, and so forth. So it allows you, the implementation allows you, when you add a parameter, color, it immediately adds it here. Maybe I can add a second one or something like that, but I wouldn't know how to do that. But the OSL code, the implementation, creates this. This is very, it's still, I would say, in its infancy, but you can do some interesting stuff. I want to go back.
Can you just make the out color? Can you just copy the color vector and then make that out color equal color vector, and then that would do it? So you just bypass all the code?
Yeah, something like that. I don't really remember how this is done. I've only seen this for 3 seconds, but basically this is just the main function, and it's just spread out. There you go. And these are the variables. This is necessary. This is where the shader is executed. And you have your color in color, which is whatever the default is. Output color, whatever that is. I think if I change this, right, I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to go and set default. There you go. So immediately when you change these numbers, the default is going to change. That's what it does. So 0, compile. You only compile it once. Reset default blue. And yeah, it's very simple. Did I crash? No, I didn't. I hit
well, with code this complex, you're bound to crash.
well, this is a lot of code. But anyhow, it's a language where you can do amazing stuff. I don't. Let me see if there's anything particular here. There you go. Look at this code. This is code I sort of stole, but it's Corona, so it doesn't do exactly what I expect. But let me show you the power. I don't know if anyone has seen this. It's not absolutely correct. Look at this. This is a flat polygon, right? What you see here is a shader. This is not 3D. This is just a plane.
Well, it's kind of like that girl that we were just looking
Exactly.
at.
So this is it.
It's the math.
Exactly. And it's loading a texture which looks like this. It's got this, every wall, the ceiling, the floor, the back, the chairs with an alpha channel. It's just a specific configuration. You can find this. This is a free, free, let's say, image that works with this OSL shader. And look at that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Rick was showing the node-based version of this a week ago or 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm. So OSL, just open your code.
Cool. That's just integrated like that. I wasn't aware.
Yep, here's the code. And you can learn. And if you don't want to learn, you can go and download ready-made stuff and do whatever you want. Look at this. You just put the cube behind it like that and move it around. And it's magic.
Da, da, da. Let's see what we've got. Here's maybe a simple question, or maybe complex. Kappa is asking, is there a way to always find the highest point on a mesh? Is there a way that's not code-based to get the highest point on the mesh? I guess it goes to what's the goal. Because you could do it, you could do different shaders that would, be determined by the vector.
Yeah. What's the application? That's the right.
Yeah. Kappa, what's the goal with it? Because our answer will change depending on that.
Because my answer is look at your screen and you will see it. Right. Don't forget there are some good ways to find it.
And then with code, obviously you could do math for like which point is the most Y.
Yep.
But obviously we typically avoid doing code if we don't have to.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Has one with the same as the bounding box height. Yeah, but you don't know which point it is.
True. Yeah. Well, you could possibly do it through Expresso. Like the goal being to attach a constraint to a particular location. Mm-hmm. Like, I guess it'd be like using Expresso to be like, hey, attach this constraint, move the constraint to exactly the highest point would be the idea.
Okay, here's the question. Here's a question. Make this editable. Rotate the axes. Which is the highest point now? So that's why this is not a very simple. You want the global highest point. You want the local.
Presumably global highest point.
Okay, global. Then yeah. So it depends if you want to find the highest point. So what happens if you have more than one? So now the global highest point is all the points around the circumference. There's not one single point that's high.
Yep.
So there's so many permutations. What I would advise is, as Chris asked, if you ask a question and it's not like very straightforward, a use case. Why are we trying to do this? Because otherwise, I think there's the XY problem, where someone could ask, how do you find the highest point? Because it's part of that individual's solution to another problem. But the real question is, how do I solve the initial problem?
Yeah. Well, it's very tricky too. I mean, I actually usually have the opposite problem where I'm asking a question and I want to know the answer in principle, and I don't want like a workaround. I want like, what is the actual fact of the matter? So this happens all the time when I'm communicating with like tech support or Maxon or something. It's like, no, I don't want a workaround. I have a very specific use case. Don't give me a workaround. I need this use case.
That is one of my, let's say, pains as well. Yeah, I'm very literal when I ask something, and the answers I get sometimes are odd.
Yeah.
So where are we?
I'm not sure. We're kind of jumping around. Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of ways. Zach's saying you could go to a structure manager possibly to get that type of information. I don't think you can get it automatically. And then if you were to build this with Espresso, I do wonder if you could run through the point node. Is there a way without Python to be running it through? And if you did get the bounding box, you would have a highest value. And you could say if any point is equal to this amount, and it would probably iterate through all of them. And then even though a bunch of, like in your current setup, it would be a bunch of them would be hitting true. The last one that's true would be the final one that's output.
We don't have a max, do we? A max?
No, there's no max, but we could, like I said, if we just did a condition, if we were iterating out a series of points, we could do a compare. And if it's comparing an equal to the highest point of a bounding box, then that would give you the highest point, I think would be the Espresso way of doing it. But it's not trivial stuff because it would be iteration.
Yes, we have a max and a min and all that in C nodes. So now it's a bit hazy in my mind.
Your brain's in the newer stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I always thought there was a max, but again. So what else do we have here? Thanks for answering an unasked question I had. Funny.
V. Ruckus mentioned. I'm not sure. Somebody else said something. But anyway, there's a couple of people. I don't know. We can tackle this highest point thing. It'd be a decent amount of work for a fairly simplistic output. So maybe some other time. But a couple of people are mentioning that they like crossfaders questions. So I will pop this up on the screen. So what do we got here? Hang on.
Just drag the window, Chris.
I'm trying. It's not letting me. With the Discord full screen, it seemed to be interfering with it somehow. What do we got? We got Polk, I guess. Polk Projects 2019. So this is probably their demo reel, which is probably going to be a bunch of crazy cool things. But specifically, he's asking about what's at 6 seconds in, which would be this. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, probably that liquidy, blobby thing. Yep. That's my guess. Do you see this water stream blobbing out? Wow, this is some cool stuff. Really fast-paced. Blah, 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 blah.
What was it there? Yep, there you go.
Yeah, right there. I mean, that just feels like some sort of animated Voronoi fracture.
Yeah.
So like Voronoi fracture is creeping its way up the shape, creating additional fractures, and then that entire thing would be in a subdivision surface and rounding itself out. Well, let's see if we can do the super quick version of this. Just see if the theory follows through. The simplest will just be a cylinder. Put that into a volume. Voronoi fracture, rather. And now we have the sources. Now, something that this is not unusual. What's the best way to do it? I think I would start cloning up along a spline. I guess an even simpler way right now would just be creating a matrix object, set that to linear. So each one is creating another copy traveling upward. I'll make it only travel up 20 units. Keyframe up the count. So this will create more as it travels upward. So at the beginning will be 0. At the end, I'll just go up to about the height. So that's creating more copies and some random on that matrix. Really simple. So just add some variation on there. So that matrix will be the source of fracturing. So we'll do that. And there's none at the beginning. And now let's see. Yeah, see now, one of the problems is it's going to be creating the, well, I don't know if it, early on it's going to be doing some weird cuts. So what I would probably be inclined to do would also be feed in a null. So this null will be another source, which will cut it at some sort of halfway point. I just move this way down, and then that could also move up with it. Let's ignore that for now, but just keep that in mind. So let's take.
You can even use, Chris. You can use the geometry glue, I think, as well in the Voronoi fracture that accepts a fall-off object. Have you played with that at all?
Does that create? Because we need volumes. Does the geometry glue prevent it? Oh, you're saying they'd be pre-calculated and then, oh, I see. Okay.
No,
okay,
it welds together. Yeah, so it allows you to control which parts of the Voronoi is going to be welded together and which one. Now, hopefully this is going to work because I'm going to put it under a subdivision. Oh, okay, it's not that bad. I mean, you can tell from the tone that,
yeah,
maybe it's going to work. Yeah, it does something.
Yeah, so instead of me animating it up, we could just do it with a fall off, which is
I have no idea if this
that's
is going
actually
to
working
work.
pretty well. And then that entire thing would have to get subdivided. Now, if we just throw that into a regular subdivision, I guess that will work all right. I think we want some more rounding, so it'd be good to subdivide it once. So my go-to is still the cloth surface rather, and subdivide by 1. That'll round it a bit, and maybe some smoothing will go a long way here. A lot of smoothing today. Let's see. Oh yeah, that's the first object. Never make it the first object.
Never.
Never. Yeah, that'll round out a bit. So yeah, well, that's the basic idea. So this could be any shape, but this being the simple setup. If this spherical fall off were to start dragging upward, then that will just create those extra chunks as we go. And even if somehow this was still looking kind of ugly, you could always throw it into a volume builder, and then that could rebuild the structure and round everything out really nicely if you put more separation in between these by separating the fragments. Yeah, putting more space in them, and we could always do a volume on it. Did you have a different take on it?
So it's mostly what you're doing, but what I'm using a plane effector to sort of make them blobby. So let me show you where I am with this. So here I'm at
almost
the
identical.
stage,
Yeah.
yeah. So here's the stage where sort of done the identical thingy-madoodle. Now I want these to become sort of bigger and being pushed out. So I'm going to go here and add a plane effector, my favorite effector, and set this to Z. So it goes in the normal direction and add points. So these become fatter. But at the same time, I'm going to add my linear field. But it's reversed. What are we going to do? Add an invert layer. Don't panic. Right? And of course, you can go and change certain variables here. So for example, here you can put the curve on top so it doesn't affect the original one, and sort of bring it in like that and do whatever you want. Pretty much 5. At the same time, what I'd like to do is push these outwards or make them dynamic or something like that. So then you go to the Fourier fracture, which is essentially a Murgraph object. And let's do in the effectors add. What can I add here? Maybe
push
I
apart.
Could the push.
No, I mean,
I'm going to add a push apart. Okay.
Well, this is a situation I don't like push apart because it'll probably be popping.
Yes, but there's a way to make it not pop that much. Come on, you have it. You got it. Which is the way?
I'm not sure. I mean, the delay. I mean, I don't know that the
exactly the delay.
Is the delay going to stop it from popping?
Well, yeah, because it's if you put it, I think in blend mode, it's at least going to make things be a bit more smooth, right?
I don't know. Maybe.
Look at that. So let me see why this is happening. Is it the push apart?
Probably.
No, it's not the push apart.
Oh, something's happening.
Something else. Oh, it's a delay. All right. That's why. So the reason why that happens is that delay needs the animation to be playing in order to update, and now it's not, which is, you can do funny stuff, right? This looks like something totally obscene. But if you take the linear field and you animate it over that, then you'll get your nice little updates. And let's see, this should work a bit better. Well, it doesn't.
It's that push apart, man. I'm telling you. I didn't think the delay worked in this circumstance. You'd have to either make the objects dynamic, which would be bad. It doesn't like changing like index count, or like a second. I don't know.
Yeah, this is an interesting exercise, though, right? So no push apart. So how are we going to do this? Let's see if this animates nicely without the push apart and the delay.
Pop. Yeah, they pop into existence, but they're still working all right.
That's not that bad. So here's, let me think of an idea. What I could do is randomize them, but I want them to go in a radial fashion. Now, there is a bit of a trick you can do using the target effector.
Ah, yes.
And then you pipe I'm not going to do the whole thing because I don't know if I can. But here's the idea. You put it through, and this is something that came from Orestes. If you get the target effector and you use only the rotation, so you have to pipe it through the target effector and do the rotation. You orient the objects without actually rotating them. I've got a setup like this, which you can create some really interesting radial motion by using this combination. I'm not going to do it now because I don't remember exactly what the setup was.
Interesting. I don't know Orestes' version, but it's years ago I did this, but I didn't. I like made a matrix that copied onto where all the clones were, rotated the matrix out, and then cloned the objects back onto it at the end. I think it's the same process, but it's before the re-effector existed.
Yep, but the re-effector is really powerful when you want to isolate specific channels. That's a great thing. We can isolate from any effector the whole channel, but there's no way to isolate one specific channel. And this is one of the most powerful things you can do. You can go here and literally say, I want only things to move on the y-axis. That's it. From whatever effector, only the y-axis. So it does allow you to do some really, really interesting stuff over here.
Yeah, I've never gotten into the re-effector. I demoed it when it came out as a new version, and then I never did anything with it afterward.
Shame on you, Chris. Shame on you.
Yeah, it probably does some good stuff. Somebody's asking how you could affect clones that are all in the exact same position, but you don't want them to all move. You want them to be one after another. And I think the easy answer to that is just to do it based off the index. So mostly using the step effector. Exactly.
That's it. That's the answer. There's no other way as far as I understand. The index is the only defining factor between cloners that exist in the same position. Or the formula effector. You can use ID, but ID so it's a step effector.
Yeah,
formula
effector. Just
effector.
ID based. Yeah.
Python, if you're going to go and be more adventurous.
And the random effector can technically randomize values on objects based on their index. So that would be another way of weighting it differently.
Exactly. And
but if they're all in the exact same spot, then that's not really a variable. They could just be in their natural index order.
But that's the way. Index basically is
the way. Okay, everybody, we got about 10 minutes. Do we have any other quick questions? Let's see.
There was a quick question that I wanted to answer. What else does the delay do besides spring? Are the other choices just like easing? Exactly. They are easing. So if you have, it's the best way to sort of calm down your animation. It's I would say if you do sound editing, it's like a compressor where it just takes away the edge and smooths things out. Just like smoothing geometry, right? Why did I say sound when we have the smoothing? All right. So yeah, it smooths the values between animation. So that's precisely
what in a lot of ways, I think of it like if you're using dynamics, it's like putting a drag on things. It's like you've taken the edge off because it will turn before it gets to the end point. Actually, to make a more specific question, what's the difference? I know that there's a difference, but I've never mechanically had in my head the difference between even and blend. What's the difference between the two of those? Because they behave very similar, a little different, but do you know what the mechanical difference is?
I never looked into it. So let me show you a tip. Right, watch this. Are you ready?
Yeah, I know what you're going to do.
Can you believe this? You can actually right-click. Let's see. It will uniformly blend the clone states. Use the strength setting to adjust the speed with which this occurs. Blend. The clone states will The clone states will first be blended quickly, then slowly. Use the strength.
Right. See, that's why I asked you, because that doesn't really tell you much. I'm assuming that one is a linear transition and the other one's an ease in, ease out type of transition. But I don't know.
I don't know. I can't even care because I would just visually make it work. Well, I say I don't care. These are the things that kill me. But I'll tell you a coping mechanism. This was the documentation is originally German and then it's translated. So, yeah, sometimes these things don't translate well.
Sometimes there's nuances that...
What we could do is put the English under a German translation software and see what comes out the other side. That's a great idea.
Let's see. Pierre, that's still a good question to hit me with when I'm by myself, and we don't have much time. Unless, do you have any magical way? It's a very popular question is like a very complex kind of neuron setup where there'd be a bunch of independent neurons and they've all got threads interconnecting between them. And if one lights up, its neighbors light up. But that starts turning into a fairly complicated rig or very faked rig. And seeing as we have about 5 minutes left, I don't. But do you have any instinct on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to see real neurons, go to I think it's iWire, I as in the human iWire.com. It's a great project where people are helping by playing a game. You are helping them decode and model real neurons. Just sign up. It's fun. It's fun. And you'll get a better idea of what a neuron looks like.
irewire.org.com is some sort of spyware.
Yep.
FYI, everybody. And the reason it won't let me drag because the Discord is full screen. That's why it wasn't letting me drag.
Excuses. Yeah.
Facts.
Yep. Sign up, people. Sign up. It's a lot of fun, and it gives you an insight of what is involved. I know it's totally... it has nothing to do with what we're talking about other than the neurons themselves. But you can see it's so complex, and I think it's some sort of fruit fly or a mouse or something like that. And basically you get flat images like that, and you go and identify what you think is part of each slice. And you're basically helping train the artificial intelligence algorithm. And this sort of technology, just play 10 minutes a week, nothing else. The participation of people is very important because this is going to help us understand better how the brain works. And the objective is to be able to treat people that have brain injuries and strokes and all that, so paralysis and all that. So it's extremely important for research. So go play, and it's a game, right?
Citizen science, good stuff.
Yep. Sorry, I don't have an answer about how to create neurons other than my friend Amy, that she is one of the top people at iWire. She provides me with models of neurons. So I apologize, I can't share them. Yes, iWire, if you check them out on Twitter as well, you will see they post some amazing little images sometimes.
Yeah, the questions are all over the place right now. I don't know how to even go about tackling any of these. The mathematical formula for emulating whatever that word is, permutations. It's not permutations, it's murmutations. So I don't know if that's a technical term or a typo.
I don't know, but I would just Google it.
Yep.
I have no idea.
Is there a way to spline wrap a single object with several dynamic splines? What? How do you wrap a single object with several? Oh, I think I see. So imagine you've got like a body and you want there to be a dynamic spline on one arm, the other arm, the leg, the other leg. So that's 4 different splines, but you want to spline wrap on all. I mean, that's not spline wrapping. What? I don't even know how I'd go about that. I mean, well, you could make the dynamic splines, run joint chains on the splines, and then bind the joint chains to the mesh, right?
Or use hair.
You can't bind. If like I'm saying, imagine you've got like a model of a human in a T-pose.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just bind the human to 4 individual hairs.
No. No, you can't. But you can bind 4 humans, 1 on each hair.
Yes, that's it. Very, very close. No cigar. Why does Noseman's nose know what Noseman knows?
That's very deep. Yeah, it's beyond my understanding. What am I trying to do here? I'm doing some generate splines. Something everyone needs to know is that multiple splines, a multi-segment spline creates clones if you use it with a spline wrap. Just in case you didn't know.
Oh yeah, we've talked about that before, where it's a kind of a weird
Yep.
way of creating multi instances of a
Yep.
single spline.
Yeah, it's a really cool method. If you go into university, I did the second batch for the Talos breakdown. I'm talking about cables, and I'm presenting an alternative method for creating long structures, because one of the main problems, if you use a sweep, the way the sweep is constructed, you get variable point counts because of the caps and stuff like that. So the solution to retain it is to use, instead of using a sweep, is to basically use the splines using a spline wrap and wrap dense cylinders on them. And that way you can retain the polygon count, and when you save them as alembics, you don't have a problem.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I use that method now with anything. And I had I got a little surprise script where you can get a cloner that's creating clones of splines, and you drag that in a script. It's a Python tag or something. I posted that somewhere. I think, yeah, if you go to University, you will find it part of the Talos thing. So I've got a file that has that Python tag in there. And which, if enough people follow me, if my Twitter following raises by, let's get a number, just pull a number, by 500 tonight, I'm going to post that script. And basically what it does, it creates a spline, an actual spline object, out of all the splines that are created by the cloner. Now you would say, but a cloner creates splines. Well, it doesn't work with the spline wrap. If you put a cloner, as far as I understand it, if I'm just going to do it now to make sure, if I make a spline and put it under a cloner and then use a spline wrap and drag the cloner in the spline, let's see if that is going to actually work. No, it doesn't. So that's pretty much the problem. And what
if you put the cloner in a connect?
It didn't work last time I tried it. I think that was the problem. That's why I had get rid of don't leave the weld on. Don't leave the weld on. Everyone say, don't leave the weld on. So let's go to the spline and let's drag the connect. No, doesn't work.
And now take the connect and put it into a spline mask.
Into a spline mask. Okay, let me try that. Let's go here.
I don't know that this will work, but it might.
Okay, and then put the capsule, the spline mask.
Ta-da.
Let's see. Yay! Fantastic.
It's a crazy workaround, but there's a thing with the connect object that it doesn't acknowledge the cloner with splines. It doesn't acknowledge a cloner with splines as a spline, so the spline wrap gets confused.
So I'm not going to get 5,000 new followers. Thanks, Chris. Oh, wait. Yeah. Cool, man. That's so kind of you. You know.
Well, here you are doing spline stuff. Yeah.
What's happening here?
Spline stuff is fine. What is happening there? You need more cap segments.
No, they're not uniformly distributed here. It's it's this little guy here, as far as I can tell. So let's just put this in here, get rid of that. Interesting.
I'm not sure what the problem is. Like, isn't it just like you have a low cap count?
Oh, it's not a cylinder. I thought I made a cylinder. I was like, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. I want a cylinder. Duh. Okay, I can't find the cylinder. I think it's that time now.
Oh, yeah. The brain's shutting down time.
Yeah. So now it's where the fun begins, right?
Yep.
And there you have it.
Ta-da.
Press A few times, get this down, get this, make it 20. But this, good, thanks. I'm going to unthank the person that wrote the script for me.
Well, maybe that's what they did to fix it. Yeah, everybody, thanks for hanging out. Old animator, leave weld on. Got it. Oh yeah, and then there's additionally you could do a trick where you run a tracer and a tracer. Well, that would interlink them, so it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Thanks for this.
thanks everybody for coming and hanging out with us today. It was fun having a guest. We'll have to have you on again sometime, man. Time flies by. For sure. Quick shout out. Make sure you join the Rocket Lasso Slack community. You can go to rocketlasso.com/community. Somebody's already been putting the links in the chat. I'll put that on YouTube as well. And you can come and hang out and ask questions, answer questions, cool little challenges, weekly sketch contests and whatnot. It's pretty cool. And then if you're supporting on Patreon, you get early access to any videos that come out and any of the scene files that I create during the Wednesday live streams. So there'll be a couple from today, I think. But besides that, thank you so much, man, for being a guest. And that'll wrap this up.
It was my pleasure as usual. I always enjoy hanging out with you virtually and in person. Wait, that reminds me of something. I can't put my finger on it.
Yeah,
anyhow,
that doesn't sound familiar.
Yeah, think about it. Yeah, thank you everyone for attending, and just fire any questions on Twitter and so forth. Maybe we should do a challenge, Chris. Challenge other people though, not us. I don't do challenges.
Oh, try and stump other people.
Yeah. Like I was thinking something like make a cube. Like anyone that makes a cube in the hardest way possible, we can set some rules. But ridiculously hard things, but nothing redundant.
Yeah,
that will be for me something. Anyone who does that gets some sort of prize, like a signed autograph of us.
I like how many times we both started a project in this, and then we were doing pretty much the exact same pathway for it as well. But anyway, okay, that'll do it. Thanks, everybody. See you next week or tomorrow for the bonus stream. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Can anyone hear me?